The starship Voyager's Hope touched down smoothly on the gleaming platform of Helios Station, a bustling outpost on the edge of known space. The station was typically a vibrant hub of activity, with beings from every corner of the galaxy trading goods, exchanging stories, and occasionally brawling in the smoky corners of seedy cantinas. Today, however, an uneasy silence clung to the atmosphere. Eyes darted nervously toward the center of the landing bay, where a solitary figure stood. She was tall, far taller than any human, with skin that shimmered in an iridescent hue, fluctuating between shades of violet and silver. Her features were sharp and otherworldly, her deep black eyes voids that seemed to absorb the light around her. She was not just any alien. She was a Xerathian, a race shrouded in mystery and fear, known throughout the galaxy for their incomprehensible powers. Her name was Kyra, and no one dared approach her. The Xerathians were rumored to wield abilities that could tear apart the very fabric of space-time or manipulate the elements with just a thought. Legends spoke of entire fleets vanishing in their presence, of worlds left desolate after an encounter with one of their kind. It was no wonder that the space around her was empty, a buffer zone created by the terrified crowd. But amidst the sea of apprehensive faces, there was one who was not afraid. Jacob Flynn, a human engineer stationed on Helios, had always been drawn to the unknown. He wasn't a soldier or a diplomat, just a fixer of broken machines and a dreamer of distant worlds. As he stood there, watching Kyra, something stirred within him, a sense of empathy, curiosity, and perhaps a twinge of loneliness that mirrored her own. With a deep breath, Jacob did the unthinkable. He stepped forward. The crowd gasped audibly as they watched the human approach the alien woman. Some murmured warnings, while others simply held their breath, expecting the worst. But Jacob didn't falter. He walked with purpose, though his heart raced with each step. When he finally reached her, he looked up into her dark, fathomless eyes, and with a calm voice, said, "Do you need help?" For a moment, Kyra's expression remained unreadable, her gaze piercing through him as though she could see his very thoughts. Then, slowly, her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, a gesture so small that only Jacob noticed. "No one has ever asked me that before," she said softly, her voice carrying an echo of a distant world. Jacob smiled back. "Well, I guess I'm not like everyone else." As the sun set over Helios Station, casting long shadows across the metallic cityscape, Jacob and Kyra found themselves walking through one of the quieter districts. Despite the stares and whispers that followed them, Jacob maintained a steady pace beside the alien woman, determined to break the silence between them. "So, what brings you to Helios?" Jacob asked, his voice casual, though he couldn't help but feel the weight of her presence beside him. Kyra glanced at him from the corner of her eye, her expression guarded. "I'm looking for something, or perhaps someone," she replied cryptically, her voice barely above a whisper. Jacob nodded, sensing that there was more to the story than she was willing to share. "And does this someone know you're looking for them?" Kyra stopped walking for a moment, turning to face him fully. "It's not that simple," she said, her tone hardening. "The galaxy is vast, and not everyone wants to be found." There was a pause as Jacob considered her words. He realized there was a deep sadness behind her guarded demeanor, a loneliness that seemed to mirror his own. He decided not to press further, instead shifting the conversation to lighter topics. They spoke about the differences between their worlds, the complexities of intergalactic travel, and the many peculiar species they had encountered. Despite the barriers between their cultures, Jacob found Kyra to be surprisingly relatable. She was intelligent, with a dry wit that caught him off guard more than once. As the night wore on, he found himself laughing with her, a sound that drew even more curious glances from the bystanders. But amidst the laughter, there was still an unspoken tension. Jacob knew there was more to Kyra's presence on Helios than she had let on, and he suspected that whatever she was searching for, it was far more dangerous than she had implied. As they reached the outskirts of the city, Kyra finally broke the silence. You should keep your distance, Jacob, she said, her voice soft but firm. Being near me isn't safe. Not for you. Not for anyone. Jacob stopped and turned to face her, frowning. Why? Because of what people say about your kind. Kyra's expression hardened. It's not just rumors. My people, we're different. We can do things that others can't even comprehend. That's why everyone is afraid. Jacob crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. I don't care about what you can do. I care about who you are. For a long moment, Kyra said nothing. Then, finally, she sighed. You're a fool, Jacob Flynn, she muttered, though there was no malice in her voice. Jacob chuckled. Maybe. But I've been called worse. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy peace. News of Jacob's friendship with Kyra spread quickly through the station, and while most people avoided the alien woman, a few curious souls began to observe the pair from a distance. Whispers filled the air, cautionary tales of the Exarethians resurfacing in hushed conversations. Jacob, however, remained unfazed. He continued to spend time with Kyra, learning more about her enigmatic culture and the strange powers she wielded. He discovered that while her abilities were formidable, they were also a source of immense burden for her. Kyra had spent her entire life isolated, feared, and misunderstood. But not everyone was as open-minded as Jacob. One afternoon, as Jacob worked on a malfunctioning reactor in the station's lower levels, his longtime friend, Tarek, approached him with a grim expression. Tarek was a seasoned engineer and one of the few people Jacob truly trusted on Helios. But today, there was a tension in his voice that Jacob had never heard before. Jacob, Tarek said quietly, you need to be careful. The station's council is watching you. They don't like that you're getting close to her. Jacob didn't look up from his work, his hands moving deftly as he tightened a bolt. They don't know her like I do. Tarek sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Maybe not, but they know her people. And they're scared, Jacob. They think she's dangerous. Jacob finally set his tools down and turned to face his friend. And what do you think, Tarek? Tarek hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. I don't know. I've never met one of her kind before. But you're walking a fine line here, my friend. Just be careful. Jacob nodded, though his resolve remained firm. He wasn't going to abandon Kyra. Not now. Not ever. The tension in Helios Station grew palpable in the days that followed. Though Jacob continued to meet with Kyra, a subtle shift began to settle over the bustling corridors. People gave them a wider berth, their whispers sharper and their gazes more hostile. Even the usual hum of the station's machinery seemed to carry an air of unease, as though the station itself sensed the growing conflict. One evening, as Jacob sat in his quarters, the intercom crackled to life. Jacob Reyes, report to the council chamber immediately. The message was terse, leaving no room for interpretation. Jacob sighed and rose to his feet. He had known this moment was coming. Still, his heart pounded in his chest as he made his way through the winding halls of the station. His thoughts raced, but one thing remained clear. He would not let them force him to turn away from Kyra. The council chamber was located in the heart of Helios, an imposing room filled with towering windows that offered a sweeping view of the stars. As Jacob stepped inside, the air felt cold, not from the temperature but from the stern faces that greeted him. 5 members of the station's council sat behind a large curved table, their expressions grim. At the center of the group sat Councilor Eris, an older woman known for her rigid adherence to station protocols. She had never been a fan of Jacob's unconventional ways, and now, with the matter of Kyra, her disapproval had only grown. Jacob Reyes, Eris began, her voice like steel. You have been brought here to discuss a matter of grave concern. Your interactions with the Exarathian have caused unease among the people of Helios. Jacob stood tall, meeting her gaze with a calm he didn't entirely feel. Kyra isn't a threat. She's. Eris raised a hand, cutting him off. That remains to be seen. We have heard the stories of her people, and we cannot afford to take risks. Helios Station must remain a place of safety for all its inhabitants, and right now your association with her is endangering that peace." Jacob clenched his fists at his sides, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You're letting fear control you. Kyra has done nothing to harm anyone." One of the other council members, a younger man named Neko, leaned forward, his tone slightly more measured than Eris. "It's not just about what she has done, Jacob. It's about what she could do. The Exarathians are powerful, far beyond what we understand. If she loses control—" "She won't," Jacob interrupted, more forcefully than he had intended. "She's been alone her whole life, isolated because of what people think she might do. But that doesn't make her dangerous. It makes her human." A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber at his choice of words, and Councillor Eris's eyes narrowed. "We cannot take that chance," Eris said, her voice sharp. "As of now, we are placing restrictions on your interactions with her. You are to limit contact to public areas only, and you are not to engage in any private meetings. Failure to comply will result in further action." Jacob's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "And if I refuse?" Eris's expression darkened. "Then you will be removed from your position and detained until we are certain of the safety of this station." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and Jacob realized just how far they were willing to go. He felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. He couldn't help Kyra if he was locked away. "I understand," he said quietly, though his mind was already working on a plan. As he left the council chamber, his thoughts returned to Kira. He knew he had to warn her, to protect her from the growing storm. But how? The council was watching his every move now, and the people of the station were growing more fearful by the day. He made his way to their usual meeting spot, a small observation deck on the edge of the station, where the stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Kyra was already there, her silver eyes reflecting the cosmos as she stared out at the void. She turned as Jacob approached, her expression calm but curious. "You spoke with the council," she said softly, more a statement than a question. Jacob nodded, leaning against the railing beside her. "They're scared. They don't understand you, and they don't want to try." Kyra's gaze drifted back to the stars, her voice quiet. "I've seen this before. Fear of the unknown leads to control, to suppression. It's always the same." Jacob reached out, gently placing a hand on her arm. "I won't let them hurt you. We'll figure this out." She looked at him, her expression softening for the briefest of moments. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me, Jacob. You don't have to fight this battle." But Jacob shook his head, his resolve unwavering. "I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever." For a moment, the two stood in silence, the weight of the universe pressing in around them. But there was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken bond that neither fear nor authority could break. "Things are going to get worse before they get better," Kyra said finally, her voice tinged with sadness. Jacob nodded. "Maybe. But we'll face it together." As they stood there, the stars burning brightly beyond the station's glass, Jacob knew that their journey was far from over. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready. He had chosen his path, and no matter what the council or the rest of the station thought, he would stand by Kira's side. The next move was theirs to make, and together they would face whatever came next. The days blurred into a tense, fragile peace. Jacob adhered to the council's restrictions, meeting Kira only in public spaces, but the feeling of being watched never left them. People whispered as they passed by, their fear palpable. The atmosphere on Helios Station had shifted. An undercurrent of suspicion wound through every interaction. One evening, as Jacob sat in the mess hall, Tarek slid into the seat across from him. He didn't speak immediately, just stared down at the steaming plate in front of him. Jacob noticed the dark circles under his friend's eyes, a sign of too many sleepless nights. "They're scared, Jacob. More than scared," Tarek finally said, his voice low. "There's talk. Worse than before." Jacob frowned, putting down his fork. "What do you mean?" Tarek hesitated, then leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "The council's considering taking action. Serious action. There's a faction that wants to expel Kara from the station altogether. Some say it's only a matter of time." Jacob felt a cold knot form in his stomach. They wouldn't. Not without proof. Tarek shook his head. "They don't need proof, Jacob. Fear is enough. And she's different. They don't understand her powers. They see her as a threat to everything. To the station, to the people. They won't wait for something to happen. They'll act before it does." The knot in Jacob's stomach tightened. He knew this was a possibility, but hearing it confirmed by Tarek made it real in a way it hadn't been before. If the council decided to expel Kara, there would be little he could do to stop them. Helios was a democracy in name, but the council wielded immense power when they deemed it necessary for the station's safety. "I can't let that happen, Tarek," Jacob said quietly, his mind racing. "Kyra hasn't done anything wrong. They can't just throw her out into space." Tarek looked at him, sympathy and concern etched on his face. "I know, Jacob, but you need to be smart about this. If you push too hard, they'll come after you too." Jacob was about to respond when a familiar voice interrupted their conversation. "They won't get the chance." Jacob and Tarek both turned to see Kira standing at the entrance to the mess hall. Her silver eyes glinted with a steely resolve that Jacob hadn't seen before. She was no longer the quiet, isolated woman he had met weeks ago. Something had shifted. Kyra walked toward them, her presence commanding attention. Though most people in the hall averted their gaze, some couldn't help but stare. As she approached their table, Tarek shifted uncomfortably, but Jacob stayed where he was, watching her closely. "What do you mean?" Jacob asked cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. Kyra took a deep breath and sat down beside him. "I didn't come to Helios by accident," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. "There's something I haven't told you, something that's been hidden for a long time." Jacob leaned forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Kyra looked around the room, as if checking to make sure no one was listening too closely, then turned her gaze back to him. "I didn't just leave my people because I was different. I left because I was being hunted. There are others like me. Gerathians with powers beyond anything you've seen. But unlike me, they don't believe in restraint. They seek control, dominion over worlds." Tarek let out a low whistle, leaning back in his chair. "You're saying there are more of you. And they're, what? Dangerous?" Kyra nodded, her expression grim. "Yes, they are far more dangerous than I could ever be. And they're coming, Jacob. I've been sensing them for weeks. They found me." Jacob's blood ran cold. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner? I thought I had more time." Kyra admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "I thought I could stay hidden here, but now, they're closer than I realized. And when they arrive, they won't care about your council or your station. They'll take what they want and destroy what they don't." Tarek's face had gone pale. "We're sitting on a ticking time bomb." Jacob felt a surge of anger and fear rise in his chest. He had fought so hard to protect Kyra from the people of Helios. But now there was an even greater threat looming on the horizon, one that no one could have anticipated. "What do we do?" Jacob asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. "We have to prepare. I'll need to face them, but I can't do it alone. If I don't stop them, Helios will be the first of many places to fall." Tarek let out a long breath, rubbing his temples. "You're talking about going to war with these other Xerathians." Kyra didn't hesitate. "Yes, and it won't be easy, but I can't run anymore." Jacob felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. He had thought he was just protecting a friend. fighting against the prejudices of the station. But now he realized he was standing on the precipice of something far larger, a battle that could decide the fate of not just Kyra, but everyone on Helios Station. "We'll figure it out," Jacob said finally, determination flooding his voice. "Whatever it takes, we'll be ready." Kyra nodded, her expression softening for just a moment. "Thank you, Jacob, for everything." As they sat there, the three of them locked in a grim understanding of what was to come, Jacob knew that the peace they had fought for was about to shatter. The shadows were closing in, and with them came war, whether Helios was ready or not. But Jacob was ready. And this time, he wasn't fighting alone. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Kyra worked tirelessly, teaching Jacob and a few trusted individuals the tactics and defenses they would need to stand a chance against the other Xerathians. She shared what knowledge she could of her people's ancient techniques, methods of shielding minds from mental intrusion, energy manipulation, and combat strategies designed to exploit even the smallest weaknesses. But the tension in the station was palpable. Whispers about Kyra's true nature spread like wildfire. While Jacob managed to convince a small group of engineers and workers to help, most of the station remained fearful, with the council tightening its grip, preparing for what they thought was an inevitable attack from Kyra herself. One evening, as Jacob stood on the observation deck, staring out at the vastness of space, Kyra joined him. The weight of the coming battle hung heavy in the silence between them. "They'll come soon," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel them, closing in." Jacob turned to her, worry etched into every line of his face. "Are we ready for this?" Kyra hesitated, then nodded, though it was clear she didn't believe it fully. "As ready as we can be. But this will be a fight like no other, Jacob. They won't hold back." Before Jacob could respond, an alarm blared through the station, red emergency lights flooding the corridors. Jacob's heart raced as the intercom crackled to life. "Unidentified vessels approaching Helios Station. All personnel to battle stations. Repeat, unidentified vessels approaching." Jacob's stomach dropped. It had begun. He and Kyra rushed toward the command center, where Tarek was already at his station, his face pale as he monitored the incoming ships. "There's 3 of them," Tarek said, his voice strained. "Big ones. Definitely not human design." Jacob leaned over Tarek's shoulder, staring at the monitors. The ships were massive, sleek, and alien, dark, jagged silhouettes cutting through the stars. A sense of dread filled the room. "They're here," Kyra whispered, her eyes locked on the screen. "I can feel their presence. The others." Jacob swallowed hard. "What's the plan, Kyra?" Kyra closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself. When she opened them, the uncertainty was gone, replaced with steely determination. "We need to draw them away from the station. If they board, it's over. Too many people will get caught in the crossfire." Tarek nodded. "We can scramble the fighter drones, try to keep them off the station." Jacob's mind raced. "And what about you? You're the one they want." Kyra's gaze hardened. "I'll confront them, but not here. If I can face them in the open, away from the station, I have a chance." Jacob shook his head. "I'm not letting you go out there alone." "You can't help me in the way I need, Jacob," Kyra said softly, her hand resting on his arm. "This is my fight." But she hesitated for a moment, then continued, "I need you to keep them from reaching the station's core. That's what they'll aim for. They'll want to disable it and leave Helios defenseless. You have to stop them." Jacob's heart pounded in his chest, but he nodded, knowing there was no other choice. "I'll do whatever it takes." Kyra smiled faintly. "I know you will." With that, she turned and headed for the docking bay. Jacob watched her go, his heart heavy with fear, but also with an unshakable sense of loyalty. He couldn't let her face this alone, but for now, all he could do was focus on the task at hand. "Get those drones up, Tarek," Jacob ordered, his voice hard. and prepare the station for lockdown. Tarek worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls. Drones are launching. Station shields are at maximum capacity. Jacob took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Good. Let's hold the line. The alien ships closed in fast, their sleek, angular forms gliding through the blackness of space. Kyra, now aboard a small shuttle, sped toward them, her mind focused entirely on the battle that lay ahead. She could feel the presence of the Exarathians inside those ships. Their hunger for power, their disdain for weakness. They wanted her, but more than that, they wanted domination. The shuttle shuddered as it exited Helios Station's docking bay. Kira could already see the station's defense drones engaging the enemy ships, bright flashes of energy streaking across the void. But it wouldn't be enough. The Exarathians were powerful, and their technology far surpassed anything the humans had. Kyra's shuttle moved closer to the lid ship, and she extended her mind, reaching out to the consciousness she knew was there. It responded almost immediately, a cold, calculating presence that sent a shiver down her spine. Kyra. The voice echoed in her mind, sharp and invasive. You cannot hide any longer. Kira gritted her teeth, pushing back against the mental assault. I'm not hiding. I'm here to stop you. A cold, mocking laughter filled her thoughts. You think you can stand against us? You who abandoned your own kind. You will fall, and this station will be the first of many to crumble. Kyra didn't respond. Instead, she focused all her energy on the shuttle's controls, steering it directly toward the enemy ship. As she neared, she could feel that Exarathian's power pulsing through the ship's hull, a dark, oppressive force. But Kyra was ready. With a final surge of energy, she launched herself from the shuttle, her body enveloped in a shimmering field of blue light. She soared through the vacuum of space, propelled by the sheer force of her will, and landed on the hull of the lid ship with a heavy thud. Inside the ship, the Exarathians felt her arrival. The one who had spoken to her, the leader, was already waiting. Inside Helios Station, chaos reigned. The Exarathian ships had unleashed swarms of smaller attack drones, and despite the station's best efforts, some had breached the outer defenses. Jacob and Tarek led a team of engineers and security forces in a desperate attempt to repel the invaders. As the drones swarmed through the corridors, Jacob fought with everything he had. His makeshift team of engineers firing energy rifles at the relentless machines. He could hear the alarms blaring, the station's automated defenses barely keeping up with the assault. The air was thick with tension and fear. They're pushing toward the core. Tarek shouted, firing another shot at a drone that had broken through the defenses. Jacob cursed under his breath. We can't let them get there. If they take out the core, the station is finished. Together, they pushed deeper into the station, trying to head off the attack. But no matter how many drones they destroyed, more seemed to come. It was a losing battle, and Jacob knew it. But he couldn't give up, not when so much was at stake. On the hull of the Exarathian ship, Kyra made her way toward an access point. With a burst of energy, she ripped open the hatch and slipped inside. The interior of the ship was dark and cold, the air thick with the oppressive presence of the Exarathians. She moved quickly, her senses on high alert. She could feel them, the others, closing in. As she entered a large, dimly lit chamber, the leader stepped forward. He was taller than Kyra, his skin a deep, shimmering black, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. You should have stayed hidden, Kyra, he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Now you will die. Kyra stood her ground, her energy field crackling around her. I won't let you take the station. The leader sneered. You can't stop us. You were always weak. That's why you ran. Kyra's eyes blazed with fury. I didn't run. I left because I saw what you were becoming, and I won't let you destroy another world. With a roar, the leader charged at her, his body surrounded by a dark, swirling energy. Kyra met him head-on, their powers colliding in a blinding flash of light. The battle was fierce, their abilities clashing with unimaginable force. Kara fought with everything she had, her energy pushing back against the overwhelming darkness of the Exorethians. But they were stronger than she had anticipated. Every blow she landed seemed to be absorbed by the leader's dark energy, and she could feel her strength waning. But she couldn't give up. Not now. Back on Helios, Jacob and Tarek reached the core, barely holding off the last wave of drones. The station was on the brink of collapse, but they had managed to keep the core intact, for now. Suddenly, the entire station shook violently, and Jacob knew that Kyra's battle had begun. "We've done all we can here," Jacob muttered, staring out at the distant battle in space. "Now it's up to her." Kyra's body ached, every muscle screaming in pain. The leader stood over her, his dark energy swirling around him like a living thing. He was about to strike the final blow. But Kara wasn't done yet. With a final surge of strength, she reached deep within herself, drawing on every ounce of power she had left. Her body glowed with a brilliant blue light, and in one explosive burst, she unleashed everything. The leader staggered back, caught off guard by the sudden surge of energy. Kyra didn't hesitate. She pushed forward, her power overwhelming his defenses, driving him back toward the edge of the chamber. "You won't take this station," she screamed, her voice filled with fury and determination. And with one final blast of energy, she sent the leader hurtling into the void, his body disintegrating into nothingness. Kyra collapsed to the ground, her energy spent, but the battle was over. The aftermath of the battle left Helios Station battered but still standing. The Council had no choice but to acknowledge Kyra's role in saving them, though the scars of the conflict would take time to heal. Jacob sat beside Kira in the station's med bay, watching as she recovered from the ordeal. She had given everything to protect them, and while there were still many who feared her, there were also those who saw her for what she truly was, a protector, not a threat. As Kyra opened her eyes, weak but alive, Jacob smiled. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved us." Kyra smiled faintly, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't do it alone." Together, they had faced the shadows and won. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. Helios Station had found a new strength in the bonds forged in battle. And whatever came next, they would face it together.